Lucia Costu, voice teacher here, another episode of Voice Series. As I said in my Instagram, we are talking again about Copertura, about what it is, the technical Copertura of Seth Riggs and of Luciano Pavarotti. I stated that it is not an absolute requirement, but it contains a part of physiology and a part stylistic. What I mean by that? If you look in my video, The Tilt of the Larynx, you're going to see that, and in the one violin as breathing functions, you're going to see, and you're going to have the links in the description if I cannot put them there, you're going to see that we have for our larynx some extrinsic muscles. Those extrinsic muscles are in the neck. They are attached to the larynx and other attachments, and they stay in this segment, which I always tells you that it is a stable segment as to the model joint by joint. I still use this model, as I said in the conferences, because in our field it is not so renowned, and it is a good baseline. It is not complete, it is not satisfying from all the points of view, but it gives a frame into which having less lost perception and less lost view. What it means that the neck is stable. And also, what are we talking about here? We are talking about the general musculoskeletal system. And as I said other times, I have added the cranial segment and under the ankles, the surface, the plantar of the feet. Because for us, they are also important, and for them, for their purposes, they were not so central, or perhaps they were a bit overlooked. The larynx is into this musculoskeletal system segment, but it is not part of this musculoskeletal system segment, because the larynx has all its muscles and its joints, its proper joints, and it is by itself a mobile joint. It is also by itself a complete musculoskeletal system. Again, we have two musculoskeletal systems in the body. The general musculoskeletal system and the larynx, the voice box. Why this is important for Copertura? Because one thing that it is often overlooked or misunderstood even is that Copertura manifests as the posturing of your larynx in such a way that your vocal folds are not overly worked, exceeding their capacity of putting pressure under them. Also said, you have a good phonation, which it is not in the perfect point, but around the perfect point, for them to be at the same time tense, maintaining the pitch, and relaxed enough not to be abused. This manifests as a sound, of course, but to get to this sound means getting to this Copertura. One of the ways that has been in the last centuries used was, first, do not train voices that don't have yet voice. Also said, do not train voices that cannot accomplish in all the extension this enough Copertura to have the voice and not to damage the voice when you add the technical tools. The technical, also said, the stylistic tools. In the last years, decades, with the flourishing of scientific method and phoniatrists and laryngologists and scientists of the voice, they have stated that you have enough Copertura where you have an isometric. And I discussed on isometric last PEVOC how we can develop isometrics into a certain structure. I will not repeat here, but I will repeat what it is important for Copertura. To get to many more isometrics means getting to many more sounds which by themselves contain enough copertura not to strain the vocal folds, and still being effective, still being heard, still being a sound production, yet of a certain quality and a certain physiology. When I talk about the muscles, the larynx muscles, extrinsic, which are in the neck, the way to work them, it is again not intuitive, because they have a lot to do with other body logics, which have to do with the unilateral. We are two, one on the right, one on the left, and we have unilateral logics into our biomechanics, and those give the possibility to the neck to stabilize the larynx while it postures it into different positions. There are some methods that use swallowing, vomiting, and all the vocal tract functions to gain that. In my experience, they are fantastic. I use many of them, not at first to find this physiological sound into the extension. Do you remember that I said many times that positions determine the function of the muscles? Also said, those muscles are going to give all a ratio of their function depending on the position. Also in the neck. You can extend the neck. Again, there are tricks. They can be fantastic. But they're not going to solve this I'm talking about in its root. What we don't realize is that the vocal tract depends from the musculoskeletal system. One simple point is that some specific momentum movements, and when I say momentum, they are movements with a load, a power, and a speed, producing momentum into your hip joint, hips, femur, will have an effect onto the extrinsic larynx muscles. And this is crucial. Because if you've seen the little boy who was non-verbal before coming to me, it is one of the strategies that I used to simply put a different context of his phonation, and of course with the usual results that I have, which are unprecedented, but are still for me usual. It's common, to me, it's a common thing now. It is common since 20 years. So what I want you to realize is that the posturing of the larynx depends on the posturing of those muscles, on the action of those muscles, which you can get directly into them. And in my hypothesis, you find some dysphonia, muscular dysphonia from that, because by themselves, yeah, they give function, always in the same way, if you do not act into the logics of those functions, which are into a bigger picture, even if not intuitive, even if not perceived, even if it doesn't look like having something to do with voice. Yeah, it's my karma, to show what it has to do with voice directly, even if it doesn't look like. But it is. Copertura of Pavarotti, where I said he didn't do exactly what he says in Juliet. Because if you look at this first video of him, you realize what? That he does something that is preached also by his colleague Mirella Freni.
Avanti piccolo. Don't start here, nella gola.
Не бойте горлом.
Non fare diretto.
Прямой звук.
Non più largo di così.
Широкого не надо, не шире вот такого положения.
E up.
She doesn't say in the terms of Pavarotti, she doesn't say in my terms, Some criticized her because she was not able to bring students to do the same, but she shows quite clearly the point in which she wants them. And with some she's effective, absolutely effective. So again, she had not other tools, but she tried her best, and with some it was really transformative. So hallelujah to her and thank you to her. She does exactly this thing. She says, you have to make it smaller on the sides, which it is exactly what happens when it is the physiological copertura to get where you have not yet developed. How we see that you have not developed? Because it is where you don't speak. Or if you speak dysfunctionally, you have not developed. We can develop it with many tools. One of my posters for the Voice Foundation was, and it is one of my workshops, you can ask me if you are a school, if you are a group, if you are an academy, a conservatory, a university. It is to separate the sound production from the words production. Again, Mirella Freni says, free words. You must have the freedom of the words. What it means? It means that you must be able to detach the pharynx constrictor's work plus some other muscles into your back of the spine, into the cervical, from the tone production, which it is from mostly the respiratory system. And again, how to do it? This is for my courses, but again, we do it in separating them. There are strategies to adapt your respiratory system, there are strategies to adapt your pharynx constrictors, also said digestive system, and those strategies have their first point into working into the biomechanical logics of the general musculoskeletal system, because you find in parallel vocal functions and general musculoskeletal system function. This is my contribution, original contribution. In the past was called breath management. No, sometimes it's really breath, and sometimes it is the musculoskeletal system logics that gets so well intertwined into the breath that they look like breath, but they don't start like breath. Second point, we do copertura to gain extension. And one thing that I find peculiar is that not many have realized that extension is not only a segment, a geometrical segment, it is also some function into our biomechanical system. And you know what? We found this copertura by some specific extensions into those segments. Those segments are related one to the other in a way for which, if one of those joints, or those segments, postural segments as you want to call them, cannot provide its action, is going to take away the same from the superior and inferior, above and below joint. If, for example, you are going to flex your hips while you want to get into extension, you're going to have a flexion and you're not going to extend the muscles that you need to. So are you going to extend the hips? Yes and no. Certainly you have not to flex the hips, because when you flex the hips, yes, you can go higher by putting more pressure under the vocal folds. which it is not the physiological copertura we're talking about. The physiological copertura we're talking about will change the sound and will make the larynx having all the registers that we know. The copertura that Pavarotti shows is not to change the sound. You can't let it change the sound, which it is the physiological copertura. Also said, the question is a little more complex and less straightforward. Pavarotti did it to have more sound where his natural voice is tenor, lyrical voice could not have. So to be a little more towered, a less lyrical, a more dramatic tenor voice. For Mirella Freni, it is crucial to do it without doing what Pavarotti does, because she wants to help to gain those high notes that Pavarotti had previously. He says he is a natural voice. Yeah, he was a physiological developed voice. And we can get there. Yeah, my result says that we can get there. Pretty easy and somewhat difficult, because you have to learn to get to something that you didn't see. But it is physiological, it is possible. Once from Pavarotti, from which you are going to hear that he goes up, doing exactly what Mirella Freni wants, in the same way. Becoming smaller, pronouncing higher. Yeah, because we get to use the pharynx muscles, the pharynx constrictors, in different places to say words. That is part of my training. Have a very good day. See you next time.